Hi, little pearls. I'm Tom.
And I'm Patrick. We're letting you know that the Chewing on Pearls website is now live.
Visit chewingonpearls.com to join our email list, browse upcoming and past events, and shop our brand new merch.
Thanks for listening.
The music and the performance and the fashion are one. I don't separate my art from my life. It is one whole thing.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Tom.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Patrick. And this is Chewing on Pearls, the show where we dissect and decipher Lady Gaga's chameleonic career and its impact, one pearl at a time.
So we're back, and today we're discussing the memorandums Lady Gaga wrote for V Magazine from summer 2011 to spring 2012. What a time. While developing a close personal and professional relationship with V Magazine's creator, editor-in-chief, and creative director Stephen Gahn, Gaga was featured in several interviews and spreads prior to her written contributions. After submitting the Little Monster fandom as a feature in the spring 2011 Discovery issue, Gaga proceeded to share her thoughts on fashion culture, art, and performance in the coming issues. While the likes of Lorde and Taylor Swift have written essays for Billboard on what it means to be a pop star, and countless legends have authored memoirs that touch on their experience of the spotlight, Gaga's memorandums take on an editorial approach that we'd argue has yet to be matched in tone, content, or style.
In recent weeks, Charli XCX wrote an essay entitled The Death of Cool for her Substack that garnered much attention and criticism online. In it, she states that she has always rejected the idea that art, film, persona, or music becoming commercial means it cannot also be considered cool. She goes on to explain that she values coolness likely out of a fear of being boring, and that a something for everyone approach to art making signifies the death of cool. She cites Brat as an example of something that began as cool but potentially lost this quality due to her loss of control of its meaning through its cultural representations and reproductions she did not create. At the end of the essay, she asks if cool can last forever, as long as the baseline taste level of the original output has the right kind of confidence.
Yeah. That was the impetus for this episode, to be honest. And it was your idea.
Yeah, I think what is interesting about Charli on Substack is I should also mention that this piece was printed in a Rabbit's Foot, which is like an art, film, criticism, print mag, online publication situation. And it made me think about Gaga's memorandums.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what you beautifully wrote in the intro about like the tone, the content, the style. And this feels closer to what Gaga was doing than maybe some other takes on pop culture and criticism. The Charli piece is interesting because though I obviously like resonate with a lot of the ideas she's talking about, and I see a lot of parallels between like the Andy Warhol obsession that like Charli has and Gaga has. This writing felt maybe because of Charli's current meta awareness and the moment coming in this movie, it almost felt like lame.
Yeah. I think it, like for me, it sort of lacked a certain level of depth of understanding that didn't, even if she has the depth of understanding, which I think she does, the piece doesn't like exemplify that meta awareness in the way that I think it could, especially when we're talking about something like being cool and what cool is. I think that that's kind of like, forgive me, but I feel like we're beyond that in a way. And she writes at length in the essay about how much she values coolness. And that's something that I don't resonate with. And like, she doesn't really take time to define what cool really is. She says sort of what it's not. And then kind of has the caveat that like, she just thinks that things can still be cool if they're commercial. And to me, that feels like her saying, I feel a little bit cringy at myself that Brat popped off the way it did when I made it. It was this record that was sort of defying commercialism in my mind.
And now we'll see, you know, with this like mockumentary film coming out, like we'll see where that goes.
Right.
Like,
right.
it feels like we're turning the corner on kind of like the full circle of the brat of it all. And it feels like she's hoping that like this will kind of complete the cycle of like the irony to the cool, to the high, to the low.
Yeah. I think I think you're right that the like mockumentary thing, the moment, will give more context to this piece of writing that a lot of people were, including myself, were very critical of.
Right. And the way that it's written is just like not great.
Right. There's I could really get into criticizing this, but this isn't the, Chewing on Charlie podcast. I don't think that she's like applying a real like lens of like understanding what commercialism really is when she's talking about the way that it impacts coolness, because again, she doesn't define coolness, and it's sort of like her understanding of coolness is like so framed by like her social world.
Right.
And I think that's sort of like a good segue to talk about Gaga and her writing and this idea of being a pop star essayist, is that there's like a level of like delusion and fantasy in Gaga's writing here in these memorandums in V Magazine that makes it in some ways both more universal and more specific.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. They are all available on V Magazine's website. Definitely, if you haven't seen the way that they're presented, you should check it out.
Right.
Because they're artworks in themselves, and like extremely stylized and have this kind of like scrapbook pastiche vibe. And it's like Gaga's writing these during a huge moment in her career, like 2011, 2012, Born This Way, traveling the world, really like experiencing fame on a global mass level.
Yeah, and at such a speed.
Yeah. And is like 24, 25, like writing these.
Right. And I think an important distinction is that, I mentioned Lorde and Taylor Swift just because sort of when I was doing research, they've like written these pieces about what it means to be a pop star. And they were for Billboard magazine, which is a, music outlet. But Gaga's writing these pieces for a fashion magazine, and she's not even talking about music,
right?
Or like necessarily being a pop star specifically, but being an artist. Mm-hmm. And I think that sort of like lends to the different quality here. It's not like, and this is no shade, but all shade. Like, I don't need Taylor Swift to tell me why pop music is powerful. I don't need Lady Gaga to tell me why pop music is powerful anymore,
Right.
But to hear her kind of like talk about her self-presentation and her ideas about fantasy and culture and art in a publication that is about fashion, which is such a means to an end for Gaga, is different and important.
Let's dive right in. So our first memorandum comes from the 71, summer 2011. It's dated May 2011. The subject line is regarding Piet Mondrian and library cards from Miss Gaga to Stephen Gahn. Copy to House of Gaga, Lady Starlight, Nicola Formichetti, Frederick Aspiris, V Collective, Little Monsters, The World, Fashion Sexuals, Andy Warhol, New York Public Library, and Bullies.
Yeah. That's like all you need to know. I'm like, episode over.
Yeah, that basically sums it up. So this memorandum is kind of her first foray into indirectly discussing the Born This Way is Madonna of it all.
Right.
And the way that she gets there is, she opens with like this statement that's incredible that says, glam culture is ultimately rooted in obsession, and those of us who are truly devoted and loyal to the lifestyle of glamour are masters of its history. Or to put it more elegantly, we are librarians.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about, she's talking about like growing up on the Lower East Side, and she was building a library. She was collecting her references, and, she was in this dingy apartment, and she had all of this art and culture and design, books and, movies and music and pieces of fashion that were from Lady Starlight and passed down heels from her great aunt. And, she's kind of building this world, and she's saying that because she put in the work, she is able to reference and annotate her work as a student of glam culture.
Right.
Whereas people might see her as a quote, quote, copycat, for lack of a better term. She's saying, where is your library card? Do you not know the reference? Do you not know that I know the reference that you say that I'm ripping off?
Right.
And like the big analogy that she uses is the Mondrian and Yves Saint Laurent of it all, where it's like, did Yves Saint Laurent plagiarize or revolutionize? And, you know, she brings up Picasso, good artist copy, great artist steal.
Right.
And then, you know, but it's like peppered with all these, like, she's like, but maybe Picasso was just like having a bitchy moment. Like,
right.
So it's this kind of like tongue in cheek, like she knows what she's saying is kind of absurd, but she's like, I believe it so much and I'm obsessed with the art that it's like, it makes perfect sense. And
Right.
if you don't get it, then maybe you shouldn't be in the game.
Right. She's sort of saying like, because I love it so much, I'm allowed to. Like,
Right.
I'm allowed to remix as much as I want because I have the library card, as she puts it.
Yes. And she said, but maybe it's just that the resolution is art gives birth to new art. There is no chicken or egg. It's molecular. Cells give birth to cells. The past undergoes mitosis, becoming the originality of the future.
Which is just like also the kind of concept behind Born This Way to begin with, like this idea of like reinvention of the self. But here she's like talking about it through like her artistic references and like her output as an artist as being something that is like definitely informed, but completely new as well.
And then she talks about filming the Born This Way music video and how for her it was important to mimic Rick Janest's tattoos as a way to like reclaim her image and explore her interests in a body modification as like a subculture and how that is like a way that people rebirth and re-identify themselves. And she shares like a fun anecdote where she like, you know, was like, I asked Zombie Boy, like, why did you start getting tattoos? And she says something along the lines of like, I'm sure everyone has asked him this. And he responds with bazooka gum.
Right.
And the little tattoos that would come with bazooka gum. And she talks about how for her, it was really healing to be in that side pony evocative of like when her mom would tie her hair up and they would dance together, and this kind of like youthful joy, but also with this like protective mask of her artistry and like using her artistry to like reflect on the bullied, scarred person, but also use it as like the armor.
Right. And that's kind of like the whole, like we get that tattoo girl in the Born This Way video, and then throughout the course of the year that was Born This Way, we're also getting Gaga as like mermaid and Gaga as alien woman and like all of these kinds of iterations of like the freak and the ways that she finds power in it. But also it is this like cathartic thing about being an outsider. So there's like an emotional quality. And I love that bit of this memorandum where she's talking about the tattoos.
Yeah.
I think it's very poignant.
And she says, I'm caught between two forces, one holding onto a ponytail and another screaming, I don't want to be angry. I want to be free. And then she says, I don't want to be a drag. I just want to be a queen.
She's funny.
Yeah. I have a passionate understanding of the history of many of the references that not only I have re-inspired, but have been reinterpreted over centuries of fashion, where they came from, what they meant, and specifically how they became modern again.
Right.
I have concurrently showed you that I could read you in the subject, but I would rather reckon with the fact that many are clinging tightly to cultural divisiveness and leaving home without their library cards.
Yeah. She just like dragged the culture. Like the amount of criticism she was getting, and like, unfortunately, the people that were reading this at the time were not her critics. You know what I mean?
Totally. I do love this part where she's like, Mugler is my silhouette's Mondrian. Cindy Crawford is my sexuality. Kermit is my whimsy. And in my Born This Way video, two of my Mondrians were Francis Bacon and Salvador Dali. In a lot of ways, the idea of being obsessed with art is my Mondrian. Just like Campbell's suit was Warhol's Mondrian, and Marilyn Monroe and Mary Paul were Madonnas. I am obsessed with all the authors in the library of pop culture.
Right. Third episode in a row where Kermit is mentioned.
Yeah.
Shout out Kermit.
Shout out Kermit. I mean, the love is real.
Yeah.
She wasn't joking.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, let's get Mugler, Cindy Crawford, Kermit at a table and see what happens.
Oh my God.
Where we are now in Gaga's career, it's funny to read this and to think like, yeah, she was sort of feeling like she had to defend herself.
Totally.
Because I think it's pretty widely agreed upon now that she is like such a student of her craft and of the culture. And that has like there's far fewer conversations about her legitimacy as like an artist now. And obviously time does that, but also, I don't know, like she doesn't have to defend it as much, or she just doesn't address it.
Right.
But yeah, I think this is interesting as like the first memorandum as well. Like getting it out, like she has an opportunity to put pen to paper in this iconic fashion magazine, this edgy, iconic fashion magazine. And she's like, by the way, before I do more of this, you're not going to clock me because I know what I'm talking about.
And I know what you're saying about me.
Right. Exactly. The little like bit at the end, the way she ends this, referring to Freddie.
Yeah.
She says, my darling hair designer, Frederick, replied, you could ask Nan Kemper, but she's dead. Now that's a queen who never left home without her library card. I think that that's like so indicative of her using like she, her pronouns to describe Freddie. I'm like, oh, right. Like it's such a reminder that she's like a gays girl.
Yeah.
In a different way.
Is the culture. Like she like, and you know, it has been going around right now. People kind of like every so often will bring up like, is Lady Gaga actually queer?
Right.
Is she like blah, 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 blah. Because people are saying like she could be the first queer person to win album of the year, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, diva.
Yeah. Like it like doesn't really matter who she sleeps with or has slept with. What matters is that she's like steeped herself and surrounded herself in queer culture.
Right.
And what queer culture celebrates, clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah, first foray into writing. Good job, Gaga. You know what's funny too is the tone of these. Like, obviously, you kind of read this bit that's sort of like a little bitchy.
Yeah, it's snarky.
But there is a certain quality even to her writing here that is similar even to like the sonnet from the Chromatica Ball or like the intro of the Mayhem Ball, like her poetry, like even just like the cadence, like she's thinking about sound while she's writing.
Totally.
I think you can tell that.
Yeah.
This is very flowery, for sure. So moving right along, memorandum number 2 was published in July of 2011. And the subject line is, I don't speak German, but I can if you'd like. Copy to Mrs. Vreeland, House of Gaga, V Collective, Little Monsters, The World, Fashion Sexuals, Philip Treacy, My Liver, My Mole, My Pearls, My Wigs, My Tobacco Cigs, and My Figs. Just so good. I'm like, put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
So this is pretty brief, this memorandum, and it kind of expands upon Gaga's ideas about fantasy and reality, and that they are inherently, of course, at odds. And I think the first line of this memorandum is something that you see quoted a lot. Like fans love this. Art is a lie, and every day I kill to make it true.
Yeah.
It is my destiny to exist halfway between reality and fantasy at all times. And she kind of goes on in this memorandum to renegotiate her relationship to escapism, because she kind of says that in the past she may have understood the line between fantasy and reality to be more concrete, and that she knew when she was sort of switching between them, but then now recognizes that that line is quite blurred. And so her moments of performance and moments of honesty are harder to distinguish from each other. She says, quote, She writes, quote, "The lines for myself have become so blurred now. I know not the difference between a moment of performance and a moment of honesty. If you were to ask me to remove my Philip Treacy hat at a party, in truth, it is the emotional and physical equivalent of requesting I remove my liver. Talk about giving Clutching Her Pearls a new meaning. I know not the difference between the hair that grows from my head and the teal wigs that grow from my imagination. They are the same. They are both honest and always have been. So maybe I know nothing of the art of escapism. I was just born this way. I revere the dream to be real. I am always and shall forever be private in public." And I think that that's such a great encapsulation of what Gaga's kind of like artistic persona and self-concept was at this time, which is no longer like after like years of being berated about like, who are you without the wig and who are you behind the scenes? Instead of like clearly defining those things, she like dove in further and was like, no, it's all one whole thing. Like the intro of our show says, it's one whole thing. And, you know, I think that this is something that a lot of fans and honestly just lovers of music and culture and fashion really cherish about this time in Gaga's career, is this idea that like she was so committed and she was so in it. And she says that that was just her being herself. She writes that here. Like, I'm just being myself in all of it, the performance and the truth. It's like all real because it's coming from me. Right. And she touches on this in the Marry the Night prelude. Like it's a very common theme. But I would also argue that it's this blurring of the line that then kind of like contributes to what then happens for Gaga a few years later, which is like this feeling lost in like a whirlwind of the fame and the criticism and her personal life and her relationships to her professional colleagues and collaborators, and like that spiral that we and she has spoken openly about during the art pop era comes from that blurring of lines. And so it's sort of beautiful and like exemplified through the Born This Way era, and then kind of like punishing in the art pop era. But and
interesting in context to like how she's talking about her identity currently during this like Mayhem press tour.
Yeah, exactly. And like, isn't that so funny that has never changed? Like just this constant like, again, renegotiation is a word that I used, of performance, honesty, person, artist, who, like, what are all of these pieces of me? And at the end of this, she says, you know, you can acknowledge a fantasy within yourself as a choice, that it's a manifestation of internal magic and the potential of your spirit. Fantasy is part of the real and honest you. And if you have a lie inside, it's waiting to be unlocked, to become true. And then she says, Scheisse, I just spoke some German. So it's just, I'm just like, this woman's a genius. Yeah. And this is like the shortest memorandum too. And I'm just like, you kind of just told everyone why you're no longer doing the like, who are you question anymore. And I think that that's powerful. It's kind of like a good follow-up to an appropriate follow-up to the first memorandum for sure.
Right. Moving right along to Memorandum 3. This is dated September 2011. The subject line is Extreme Critic Fundamentalism. From Miss Gaga to Stephen Gahn. Copy to Miss Freeland, House of Gaga, Nicola Formichetti, V Collective, Little Monsters, The World, art historians, intellectuals, journalists, columnists, Kathy Horn. I love this one. This is where Gaga is firing back.
She's Brat.
She is, yeah. This is the OG. So it's her, again, kind of directly and indirectly addressing her beef with noted fashion critic Kathy Horn, who at the time was very critical of Gaga and her role in fashion and these relationships that she was developing with designers that she felt she didn't deserve. And she famously shaded Donatella for opening the archives for Gaga, and was like, paraphrasing, but like basically like do better, like choose a better person.
Wow.
Which was like terribly offensive. And like, obviously Donatella knew what was up because Gaga digging in the archive like really exploded Versace.
Right,
like,
right.
So that was kind of like the first shot. And then there was a situation with an Oscar de la Renta collection that Kathy Horn like really roasted and basically was saying was like derivative of like a Raf Simons thing, and then like called Oscar de la Renta a hot dog, and like it got like kind of nasty. So Oscar de la Renta takes out like a full 1-page ad in Women's Wear Daily and like writes back, and Gaga like shares it on Twitter, and is like, how chic to use Women's Wear Daily for this. So it was getting a little
dicey.
Yeah. So this memorandum is basically her arguing cynicism is ruining criticism. You can now predict the predictable reviewer. And why does it become injury over insight? She is saying that she has defined this term extreme critic fundamentalism, which is instilling fear in the hopes and dreams of young inventors in order to establish an echelon of tastemakers.
Right.
So she's basically saying like, you are gatekeeping and you are saying that your take is the only take, but if your take is only seeped in this like deep cynicism and narcissism and negativity, like, are you actually providing anything that's like insightful and constructive?
Right. She's right.
Yes, the public operates under the assumption that critics are experts in their fields, but Gaga argues if they aren't experiencing the transcendent, they are not. So that's where it's like, okay.
She like can't not take it there, though.
And then it's funny because she's like talking about like math and science and like objective facts. And then like she does this like analogy about the Titanic. And she's like, did they consider the temperature of the water and the blah, 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 and break all this down. And then she's like, but my line of work is not math or science or these things that are like objective. They're all subjective. However, like we are at the point now, she's like, as the queen of Twitter, like kind of throwing it back, being like, you think that I'm just some like little idiot Pop-Tart. She's like, but as the queen of Twitter, I see 14, 15-year-olds out here doing really insightful, developed, researched work in criticism. She shouts out Tavi Gevinson and Ricky Mag. She's like, the idea that a 15-year-old could be delivering more thoughtful, considered research criticism online than a storied print journalist.
Right.
And so she says, to be fair, Miss Horn, the more critical question to ask is, when did the pretense of fashion become more important than its influence on a generation? Why have we decided that one person's opinion matters more than anyone else's? Of all the legendary designers I have been blessed to work with, the greatest discovery has been their kindness and their lack of pretense. So she's basically saying fashion is for everyone. And like, if you want to be taken seriously as a critic, you have to understand the like transformational and transcendent power of the art form. Right.
Totally. Which is like still true. Still very true.
Right.
It's like another kind of like piece of Gaga, what's a good word? Kind of like attitude that I think a lot of monsters like really clung to at this time too, was like her clapping back. Right. Like she was more open to doing that and more ruffled, I think, by that kind of open criticism of her, and using the fashion a fashion magazine to speak to this, I think is really fierce. And it like really illuminates that she has a relationship with fashion that really can't be put into words either, because she just calls it the transcendent. And she talks about, you know, what it feels like to be in a perfectly customized garment. And I think she's kind of asking, like you just said, like, hey, lady, have you ever felt that way?
Right.
Like, can you talk about this if you haven't?
Right.
Because it's like Gaga's somebody who also can see the value in anything, any piece of art, and will take from even a fashion collection that she doesn't love. She'll take something from that and put it in her library.
Right.
So yeah, Gaga's like punk rock here.
Yeah. It's so fucking awesome.
Moving right along, memorandum number 4 was published in November of 2011. The subject is Remodeling the Model. From Gaga to Stephen Gahn, copy to Ms. Vreeland, House of Gaga, Nicola Formichetti, V Collective, Little Monsters, The World, art historians, intellectuals, and Joe Calderone. So this issue of V Magazine was an exploration of the model and what it means to be a model. And so Gaga's piece speaks about what it means to reshape that model. She details her work with Nick Knight in creating Joe Calderone. She says, I ate a bovine heart. I have birthed a new generation of aliens. I've given birth to a machine gun with Nick Knight. And we were like, what do we do next? And he and I decided that she says, in a culture that attempts to quantify beauty with a visual paradigm and almost mathematical standard, how can we fuck with the malleable minds of onlookers and shift the world's perspective on what's beautiful? I asked myself this question, and the answer, drag, which I am like, of course.
Right.
I'm like, why is she more...
why does she get it more than working drag artist?
Yes, exactly. And she goes on to say that they took photos of Joe Calderone and disguised Gaga's identity, submitted them around to men's fashion magazines, and it ended up on the cover of Vogue Homme Japan, which is like a major Japanese men's publication. And she says that Nick Knight kind of questions her and is like, do you think that they know it's you? Do they think they feel your like performance spirit through these images? These like, do they know? And it's kind of an unanswered question before Nick then says, I think that Joe has to sing. And so she goes into how she struggled with this idea about performing as Joe Calderone and realized that it wasn't about performing as Joe Calderone, but about wrestling between Gaga and Joe Calderone and sort of like being him and asking herself questions as him. So through that kind of internal process, she says that she was having conversations with Joe and confessing things about herself as a woman to him. Questioning her relationships and asking if her lovers feel like part of the show, asking how is Joe Calderone more relatable and lovable than I am. Wow. And I pulled this quote that I thought it's kind of long, but it perfectly sort of captures this. She says, quote, during my performance and the 3 days I spent as him, I felt permission through him to confess things about myself as a woman, things I would normally keep hidden. In a way, it seemed that he could get away with a lot more than I can. He talked about his feelings, wore Brooks Brothers, smoked Marlboro Lights, drank beer on stage, and talked about what I refused to discuss publicly, my relationships. It was by remodeling myself into something completely foreign and in some ways crafting the anti-pop performance that the complexities of the model began to unfold. For someone known as much for her image as for her music, and this has become my model, the presence of Joe in no way eradicated my spirit from the stage. I was still ever present and in fact more myself than ever. Joe had a clean slate. Joe had no past or future to answer to. Joe existed only in that moment as I chose for him to. And so I think this also touches on what you were getting at and what she got at in Memorandum 1 about the tattoo, like the Rick Janest thing, sort of like embodying a disguise and a persona through which she can feel more honestly herself. Right. And that, again, performing as Joe Calderone at the VMAs was this opportunity for her to sort of like flip everything on its head that people had expected from her. And she did do that. Like at the time, I think people like joke about it a lot now because it is funny. Like it's camp.
But her performance.
Yeah. It's kooky.
It starts the show.
Like she gagged them.
So good.
And I think kids these days, not to sound like, old gays, but they don't understand like how shocking that was at the time. And like we're talking about, was that like the 2012 VMAs, 2011 VMAs. Yeah. And like we're talking like Drag Race season 4 is airing. It's not like drag as a sort of like mainstream C-list, D-list kind of art form or celebrity form doesn't exist. So for her to do this and for people to be truly confused fierce. And I love the idea of like remodeling what it means to be the model and finding that like my expression and my spirit is still coming through because I can't help it. It's who I am. She says that remodeling herself, remodeling the model, liberates the present, raises revolution against what people expect, but to beware that your latest incarnation may be the most honest yet. Which again is just sort of the concept of Born This Way, like this endless rebirth, and that like whoever you wake up as today is who you are.
Right.
You know? So that's memorandum number 4.
Moving along, memorandum number 5 is from V75, the spring preview in 2012. It's dated January 2012. Subject line, notes from designers from Miss Gaga to Stephen Gahn, copy to Miss Freeland, House of Gaga, Nicola Formichetti, V Collective, Little Monsters, and the World. This memorandum is 3 notes included from designers that Gaga was working with at the time. And it includes some behind the scenes images of fittings and sketches from the designers. So Giorgio Armani says, "It is always stimulating to work with Lady Gaga because it allows my imagination to roam free in order to create genuinely theatrical stage costumes, as was the case on this occasion." Lady Gaga is an artist with a huge personality and amazing stage presence. I was attracted by her genuine interest in fashion and design, which she projects with a conviction that knows no limits and which she definitely considers a vital ingredient of her career. So that basically is like a huge cosign that's like, She knows what she's talking about and it's integral to her art.
Right. She's like, let me back everything I've been saying so far up.
Right.
With some testimonials.
Right. Manish Arora was the artistic director of Paco Rabanne at the time, described Gaga and working with Gaga as daring, far beyond fashion and beauty. Gaga's style is unpredictable, iconoclastic, yet iconic and out of time. She is now in tomorrow, between fantasy and reality. She is a statement of recreation, a piece of art.
Yeah. And describing her as that, not her work,
right? But
like she herself
the person
is that.
Yeah. And then Carl. Gaga gives the world her music and her talent, but the thing I like most is that she fights against boredom and banality. She also puts forth an ever-changing, inspiring, and strong image, an image beyond fashion. She is an extreme concentrate of zeitgeist, freeing us from the heavy boredom of publicly displayed political correctness by being herself more than politically correct. Something in today's world would be missed if there would be no Lady Gaga, because Gaga is a lady.
True.
I do think it's interesting that Carl slips in the like PC of it all, because that, I mean, he is like, we could
totally
really go down that rabbit hole. And it's like Gaga was kind of, you know, taking big swings and saying things that were like shocking and risque, but I don't think she was operating from a place of shock and like trying to.
No. And if she was, it was for the purpose of not wanting to be told who she was.
Right.
Like, which is a different thing.
Right.
But yeah, of course, Karl Lagerfeld is going to bring up like, she doesn't care about being politically correct. See, she's a superstar.
Right.
But I do love that he says she's an extreme concentrate of the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
That's what she still is.
Yeah.
She's like a distillation of, we've talked about this so much, but like all that came before her and sort of a projection of what's happening in the future.
And I do think it's interesting that when we think about like some of the custom stuff that Gaga, like Chanel and has made for Gaga when Karl was still around, it is, you know, he's like the boring and the banality. Like he knows like a Chanel tweed suit will sell, but he's like, oh, I can take the Chanel codes and like crank it for Gaga. Yeah.
It's like important for her to have these testimonials. And I think it's important to see them in writing and not these like clips of people being like, yeah, Gaga, I love her.
Right.
It's like these are very considered words here.
Right. That they sent to her, that she sent to the magazine.
Right.
She's like, hey, can you just like talk about me for a little bit?
Yes. Like 2 or 3 lines, just
like when you think about me, what do you think?
Along.
Yeah.
Okay, well, fittingly, the final memorandum Gaga wrote for V Magazine, memorandum number 6, published in March of 2012, is entitled More Pearls, Please.
I know that's right.
From Gaga to Stephen Gahn, Copy to Ms. Vreeland, Yankees, Mets, the brain of the industry, Mikimoto, mollusks, Cleopatra, all players, coaches, all-stars, and confused veterans. And she starts the article with a quote that says, "Nobody likes the game that they've won over and over again to change." So this was the sports issue of V Magazine.
So funny.
So she's like, how am I going to write about sports? She like kind of makes fun of herself a little bit. But she instructs readers to Google Lady Gaga at the Mets game, and you'll find a photograph of a not sober, very drunk Gaga flipping the birds. And she kind of jokes about that a bit, but she says that her editor emailed her for article copy for this issue, and she said, I can really like rise to this challenge and talk about the game and talk about competition, talk about being a winner. And so she goes on to detail how 2011 was one of the most exciting and difficult years of her life. And she made a pact with herself when she put out Born This Way that was like, when I win, I want it to mean something. I want every win to be a force. And to be able to look out into the sea of fans and know that our, quote, win has changed the industry and changed each other. Wow. I'm going to read this quote because she kind of then turns to pearls. She writes, I wonder how many thousands of years ago the first pearl was discovered. In fact, I wonder who discovered it. Was it a fisherman, or did Cleopatra on her yacht summon a mollusk? Did her fabulous male makeup artist hang it on a tiny spear and say, oh, darling, on your ears? I thought of the pearl during my exploration of the game because as an accessory, pearls are the most game-changing and timeless of them all. There's no crime or conflict surrounding them. They are neutral and perfect, and they are gifted as a gesture of elegance and womanhood. For thousands of years, they've never gone out of style, and to this day, no one knows when or how they were discovered. They have no sense of time or beginning. They are cyclical in nature and in existence. To correct Gaga, there definitely is crime and conflict surrounding pearls. Like a lot of people, the pearl industry is very strange.
As ambassadors for Big Pearl. No.
Yeah. And definitely can damage marine life. But I think her getting at the timelessness of them is important when she's talking in the context of her wins during the Born This Way era. So she goes on to say that 2011 was the first year she decided to get herself something really nice for Christmas. So she's in Japan, she's shopping for Mikimoto pearls, and she decides to get a string of pearls for herself, her mother, her sister, and her best friend, Bo. Then she connects this to watching the film Moneyball on the plane, which is where that quote that I read at the top comes from. It only matters if you've changed the game. And so she describes looking down at her pearls while she's watching this film on her PJ and being like, I'm imagining all of the pearls around my neck as home runs, as this gift is symbolic of everything that I've won this year. She says that in music, what's different than in sports is that you're in competition with the psychology of the industry and with yourself more than other people. And she asks, how do I make everyone question every run scored? How do I bewilder some of the greatest players of all time? She's thinking about how does she make her wins mean something bigger than just a win? And she says that sometimes she's so deep in the work, she doesn't even recognize when she wins. And so she kind of wraps it all up by saying that to the readers, your achievements are working toward the greatest accessory of all time, which is nerve. And I just love this. I think this is the most essay-ish of all of them, where she's like, here's a topic. Here's some disparate things that I'm connecting. And this piece of writing is so lovely and fun to read. And I think people don't talk about this one as much. Right.
Because it's not like cutting or in response to things that have been said about her.
Right. It's not necessarily about, and it's kind of like her celebrating her wins as well in like a more like, I'm allowed this actually kind of way, and sort of celebrating the year that she's had. But at the same time, like a true essay, she's taking something she heard in a film, a gift she bought herself, the idea of a pearl and the idea of a home run in baseball, and sort of like distilling that into like one thing. And I think it's kind of brilliant. And this is like the type of writing that I would want to read from like truly anyone, like but the pop girls should take note if they're going to be writing. Yeah.
And how fitting.
Yeah, pearls.
And, you know, when I think about like when we introed our show, the very first episode, and we were like, why pearls? You know, a lot of our thoughts and ideas of pearls, it's like she shares those.
Right. And she says, in the spirit of the Super Bowl and all things sporty, wear your pearls, wild, cultured, real or fake, wear them proud. The Born This Way era is this victory lap for her, her first kind of big victory lap, where I do think she still is able to think back on that time and be like, I was winning.
Yeah.
And I like loved it. And it was like deserved. And I worked really hard. It was the most important
album she's ever made.
Totally. And she says that all the time. So yeah, I think to sort of like circle back to the Charli XCX piece of it all, because that was sort of the impetus, as I said earlier, for this episode. I think it is kind of comparing apples and oranges, unfortunately.
I think some of the ideas,
the
core ideas that they're talking about, like the artifice of it all, you know, it's we say this, you know, we're Charli fans, of course, but she's like a begrudging daughter of Gaga.
Right.
It's like they're more similar than they are different. But Charli now, I think, is like, I don't know if she's necessarily embarrassed by her past, but I don't know. I feel like she's like framing herself in a way now where it feels like she wants some distance from the years of being uncool, quote, quote.
Yeah, I think that's sort of what's like a key difference with her and Gaga is Gaga like understands her past as part of her library.
Right.
And I think there is this Charli angle where it's like, oh, this is what I'm being celebrated for. Keep more of this, more of this. And I mean, I know she's going to surprise us and like turn that narrative on its head, because that's who Charli is. But it is kind of like, there is like a tone of almost like resentment, I feel like, that she has for, I feel like it is her trying to take down critics of Brat.
Right.
Of like, almost like saying to her like deepest, oldest fans, or like people who like the edgy quality of Brat, like not the like pumpkin spice latte girls who love Mean Girls.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's not shade. That's just is what it is, because it's a huge, incredible album. But she's like not doing it with this like the grace of self-awareness that we see Gaga having, where Gaga is like sometimes being kind of bitchy in these pieces, but like in a way where she's like, LOL.
Yeah. Well, and it's also the medium too.
Right.
I do think that, and you know, this episode is coming out around the new year, and there is kind of this, I don't know, desire for everyone to be a personal essayist, and like the Substack of it all, the writings and expressing yourself in that format has become so like central to our generation in a way. And I feel like that's
it's a
why,
Tumblr effect.
Yeah. And I feel like that's why when Charli like put out the Substack, of course, no matter what it was, there were going to be people that immediately were like, this is stupid. She's dumb.
Totally.
Which like, that's not what we're saying at all.
Not at all. No.
But it's like restarting the conversation of like, should we care about what a pop star is even saying?
Should we require that a pop star describe their inner workings? Like, I don't know.
Right.
Like, what? Like, obviously, she wrote this for a publication, like you said, but like, what? Why is she being asked to talk about cool? I'm sure she was given a prompt.
Right.
Like, what is that? And like even Gaga, it's like at the time, like, what about the culture then? What were people like her intrigue and her mystery? People were demanding to see her or hear her voice more clearly, I think.
And these avenues, you know, like V Magazine and Rabbit's Foot are not like
no
People Mag, you know, like, so you have to a certain extent be like seeking it out. But I think with the Substack of it all, it's interesting. And then, you know, you just sent it to me the other day. Doechii has a Substack and like, I haven't checked that out. And I do think it's interesting, like hearing
I think you
time.
should read it. Honestly, it's the piece that Doechii published a few days ago is called My Showerhead is Racist.
Oh, wow.
And it's tongue in cheek and kind of like, it's not an essay. It's not a think piece about the culture, but it's about her experience of hotel bathrooms as being her like beauty lair and how the first thing she asks when she's booking a hotel is like, what is the shower head like?
Yeah.
As a Black woman, and how can she like supremely care for herself?
Wow.
And it's sort of like it's somewhere between what Charlie did in this in a weird way, where it is a little bit more challenging of like, you can think I'm a diva.
Right.
I don't really give a shit because this is what I want and this is what I deserve when I like travel. And like, I think it's an interesting read. So to everybody listening, read the Charlie piece for sure. Read these 6 pieces, read Doechie's piece while you're at it. But I wonder if we will get more of this from more girls.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What I will say though is like Gaga has definitely written things since.
Yes.
And I don't know if I feel the same way about more current things that Gaga has written than I do about these.
Yeah.
There's something about like she was so in it and she also was like still so young but old enough. You know?
She
it's
had
like
a
kind of like
foot
the
in
sweet
both.
spot of where it's like one thing out of her mouth was like incredibly profound and then the next thing was like, oh,
silly.
Yeah.
I know. I think that a lot of the writing that like of this like amount that we've seen from her has been like sort of about her work, her music, which I think is different. But I almost think that now she might like shy away from being prompted to talk about the culture and like the culture of criticism and all this stuff, because I think she is older and is just kind of like part of her power now is being like, I don't really give a shit whatever anyone thinks.
And I mean, she said I am a kindness punk, and ever since then it's like you know.
Like I think like the closest that we've gotten recently to her kind of like addressing critics was, you know, a year later, her talking about with Zane Lowe, was it? What interview was it where she was talking about the failure of Joker 2 and how that kind of like hurt her?
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
And she was actually kind of like sad about it, but like she didn't even address critics directly necessarily. But I don't think that I think she made it clear in Memorandum, what was it, number 3, that she's like not interested in what critics have to say about her work.
Right.
So, well, yeah, that's the Gaga literature. Sacred texts, check them out.
And don't forget, a pearl a day keeps Kathy Horn away.
Yeah. Retweet. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Please let your